the buzzards circling overhead, were what made Clara Whitmore pull her horse to a stop on the dusty trail between Silver Creek and her family's ranch, her heart sinking at the thought of what those scavengers might be waiting for. She squinted against the harsh Wyoming sun of July 1878, scanning the rocky terrain until she spotted the crumpled figure sprawled beside a cluster of sagebrush about 30 yards off the main path. At 22 years old, Clara had seen enough death on the frontier to recognize the stillness of it, but something made her dismount anyway, grabbing her canteen and the small medical kit her mother always insisted she carry. Her boots crunched on the dry earth as she approached, leading her mare behind her. The man was face down in the dirt, his dark hat fallen several feet away, his clothing torn and stained with blood that had dried to a rusty brown in the heat. Clara knelt beside him, her fingers trembling slightly as she pressed them against his neck, searching for a pulse. For a long moment she felt nothing, and then there it was, faint and thready but unmistakably alive. "Thank God," she whispered, though she knew her work was far from over. With considerable effort, she managed to roll him onto his back, getting her first clear look at his face. He was young, probably around her own age or perhaps a few years older, with dark stubble covering a strong jaw and a nasty gash across his temple that had bled profusely. His shirt was soaked with blood from what appeared to be a gunshot wound to his shoulder, and his lips were cracked and bleeding from dehydration. Clara had no idea how long he had been lying here, but given the condition of his wounds and the unforgiving heat, she knew it had to have been at least a day, maybe longer. She uncapped her canteen and carefully dribbled water onto his lips, watching as his throat worked instinctively, even in unconsciousness. His eyelids fluttered but did not open. Getting him onto her horse was going to be nearly impossible alone. Clara was strong from years of ranch work, but this man was tall and solid with muscle. She stood, hands on her hips, calculating the distance to her family's ranch. It was about 3 miles west, but her father and brothers had ridden to Cheyenne 2 days ago to sell cattle and would not be back until tomorrow at the earliest. That left only her mother and younger sister Sarah at home. She made her decision quickly. Clara retrieved a blanket from her saddlebag and spread it on the ground beside the injured man, then spent the next 20 minutes using every ounce of strength she possessed to roll him onto it. She fashioned a crude travois by tying the blanket to her saddle, knowing the journey would be rough on him, but seeing no other option. Leaving him here meant certain death. The 3-mile journey took nearly 2 hours, with Clara walking beside her mare and stopping frequently to check on her patient. He remained unconscious the entire time, which she supposed was a mercy given the circumstances. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon when the Whitmore ranch house finally came into view, a sturdy 2-story structure her father had built with his own hands 15 years ago when they first settled this land. Her mother, Catherine Whitmore, came running from the house when she spotted Clara approaching with the travois, her flour-dusted apron flying. Sarah, who was 18 and had inherited their mother's blonde hair where Clara had their father's dark brown, was close behind. "Clara, what on earth happened?" Catherine demanded, her experienced eyes already assessing the situation. "Found him on the trail," Clara explained breathlessly. "He has been shot, maybe robbed. I could not just leave him there." Catherine's expression shifted from shock to determination. "Sarah, fetch clean water and all the linens from the upstairs cupboard. Clara, help me get him inside to your father's study. We can lay him on the couch there." Between the 3 of them, they managed to get the unconscious man inside and situated on the leather couch in her father's wood-paneled study. Catherine immediately began cutting away his ruined shirt while Clara pumped fresh water and Sarah gathered supplies. The wound in his shoulder was worse than Clara had initially thought. The bullet still lodged in the muscle. "We need to get that bullet out," Catherine said grimly, her mouth set in a determined line. She had served as the closest thing to a doctor for miles around, having learned medicine from her own father back in Ohio. "Clara, I will need your help. Sarah, you keep that water boiling and tear those linens into bandages." What followed were several intense hours of delicate work. Catherine cleaned the wound thoroughly while Clara held the man still, though he barely moved, his body limp and burning with fever. When her mother finally extracted the bullet with a pair of sterilized forceps, Clara felt her own shoulders sag with relief. "The shoulder will heal," Catherine announced, stitching the wound closed with practiced efficiency. "But he has lost a lot of blood and this fever is worrying. The next few days will tell us whether he is strong enough to pull through." They cleaned and bandaged his other wounds, the gash on his head and various cuts and bruises that suggested he had either fallen from his horse or been thrown. Catherine also noted what appeared to be rope burns on his wrists, as though he had been tied up at some point. "Whoever did this to him wanted him dead," she murmured, wrapping clean bandages around his shoulder. "Or at least did not care whether he lived or died." Clara helped her mother cover him with a light blanket, then stood looking down at his face, now cleaned of blood and dirt. Even unconscious and injured, she could see he was handsome, with high cheekbones and thick dark hair that fell across his forehead. There was something about his face, even in repose, that suggested strength and perhaps stubbornness. "We will take shifts watching him tonight," Catherine decided. "The fever needs to be managed, and he will need water when he wakes. Clara, you take first watch since you are the one who found him. I will relieve you at midnight." Clara pulled a chair beside the couch and settled in for the long night ahead. Sarah brought her a plate of cold chicken and bread, along with a pot of coffee, before heading to bed. The house grew quiet as darkness fell, the only sounds the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner and the occasional restless movement from her patient. She spent the hours sponging his forehead with cool water, trying to bring down the fever that made his skin burn to the touch. Several times he thrashed and mumbled incoherently, and she had to hold him still to keep him from tearing his stitches. Once his eyes opened, but they were glazed and unfocused, seeing nothing before sliding closed again. "You are safe now," Clara told him softly, though she did not know if he could hear her. "You just need to fight. You need to live." The words felt strange in her mouth, this fierce need for a complete stranger to survive. But she had not hauled him 3 miles across rough terrain just to have him die in her father's study. Catherine relieved her at midnight, and Clara stumbled to her own bed, falling asleep almost instantly despite the tumult of the day. She woke at dawn to find her mother still sitting vigil, looking exhausted but satisfied. "The fever broke about an hour ago," Catherine reported. "His breathing is easier. I think he is going to make it, Clara." Relief flooded through her, surprising in its intensity. "Has he woken at all?" "Not properly. But he seems to be resting now rather than fighting. That is a good sign." Catherine stood and stretched, her back crackling. "Your father and brothers should be home this afternoon. We will need to decide what to do about our guest." Clara took over the watch again, sending her mother to get some proper sleep. The morning sun streamed through the window, illuminating dust motes in the air and casting the stranger's face in softer light. She found herself studying him, wondering who he was and what had happened to bring him to that desolate stretch of trail. It was mid-morning when his eyes finally opened, truly opened and focused on her face. They were gray, she noticed, the color of storm clouds and filled with confusion and pain. Where am I?" His voice was barely a rasp, his throat raw from dehydration and fever. Clara quickly poured water from the pitcher into a cup and held it to his lips. "Drink slowly," she instructed. "You are at the Whitmore Ranch in Wyoming. I found you on the trail 3 days ago. You were shot." He drank greedily, and she had to pull the cup away to keep him from making himself sick. "Easy," she said gently. "There is plenty more." His gray eyes searched her face as if trying to determine whether he could trust her. 3 days. You have been unconscious most of that time. You had a bad fever, but it broke last night. She allowed him another small sip of water. "What is your name?" He was silent for a long moment, and Clara wondered if he was going to refuse to answer. Finally, he said, Jack Thornton." "Well, Jack Thornton, I am Clara Whitmore. My mother and I removed a bullet from your shoulder and stitched you up. You are very lucky to be alive." Something that might have been a smile ghosted across his lips. "Lucky is not exactly how I would describe it, but I thank you for not leaving me to die out there." "Can you tell me what happened to you?" His expression shuddered, becoming guarded. "I ran into some trouble. The kind of trouble that involves being shot and left for dead." Clara kept her voice gentle, but there was steel underneath. "If someone is looking for you, my family has a right to know. My father and brothers will be home this afternoon." Jack closed his eyes, exhaustion clearly overwhelming him despite having just woken. "I am not running from the law if that is what you are worried about. But the men who did this might come looking to finish the job. You should not have brought me here. I have put you in danger." "Well, it is too late for that now," Clara said firmly. "And we Whitmores do not turn our backs on people who need help, danger or not. But you need to tell us the whole story." He looked at her again, those gray eyes studying her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You are either very brave or very foolish, Clara Whitmore." "I have been called both," she admitted. "Now rest. We will talk more when you have gotten your strength back." Jack's eyes drifted closed again, and within moments his breathing had evened out into sleep. Clara sat back in her chair, her mind spinning with questions. Who was Jack Thornton, really? What kind of trouble had he gotten himself into? And why did the thought of him leaving once he healed fill her with an unexpected sense of loss? Her father, Thomas Whitmore, returned that afternoon with her brothers, James and William, their wagon loaded with supplies purchased with the cattle money. Catherine met them at the door and quietly explained the situation before they could enter the house. Clara heard her father's heavy tread as he entered the study, his weathered face creased with concern. At 55, Thomas Whitmore was still a formidable man, tall and broad-shouldered with a reputation for fairness but also for not suffering fools. Her brothers flanked him, James at 25 and William at 23, both bearing the same dark hair and strong build as their father. Jack was awake again, and he met Thomas's appraising stare without flinching, though Clara noticed him wince as he tried to sit up straighter. "Stay down, son," Thomas said, his voice gruff but not unkind. "My wife tells me you took a bullet. My daughter tells me there might be men looking for you." "That is possible, sir," Jack admitted. "I am grateful for the help your family has given me, but I will understand if you want me gone as soon as I can ride." Thomas pulled up a chair and sat down heavily. "Why do not you start by telling me the whole story, and then we will decide what is to be done?" Jack glanced at Clara, who had positioned herself near the window, then back at her father. "I was working as a ranch hand on the Circle M spread about 50 miles south of here. The foreman, a man named Coltrane, was skimming from the owner, selling cattle on the side and pocketing the money. I found out about it and confronted him." "Let me guess," William interjected, crossing his arms. "He did not take kindly to that." "He and 2 of his men jumped me in the barn 3 nights ago. Beat me pretty bad, tied me up and took me out into the middle of nowhere. Coltrane shot me and left me for dead." Jack's jaw tightened. "I managed to get the ropes loose after they rode off, but I was losing blood fast. I tried to walk back toward civilization, but I did not make it very far before I collapsed." "You have proof of what this Coltrane was doing?" Thomas asked. "I had a ledger book showing the discrepancies, but they took it when they took me." Jack's frustration was evident. "The owner, Mr. Mackenzie, is a decent man, but he is getting old and spends most of his time in Denver now. He trusts Coltrane to run things. I doubt he has any idea what has been going on." James, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "I know Mackenzie. He sold possum breeding stock a few years back. He is honest, always has been." "Then this Coltrane has been taking advantage of that," Jack said bitterly. "And I nearly died because I tried to stop it." Thomas was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming on the arm of his chair. Finally, he said, "You are welcome to stay here until you heal up, Thornton. We do not turn away a man who is trying to do the right thing, but I want my family safe. If these men come looking, they will find themselves facing all of us. James, William, I want the rifles cleaned and ready. We will take turns on watch at night." "Pa, you do not have to do this," Jack protested. "I can leave, head north or east, lead them away from here." "You can barely sit up without turning white as a sheet," Clara interjected sharply. "You would not make it 5 miles before falling off your horse. If you even had a horse, which you do not." Jack looked at her, surprise and something else flickering in his gray eyes. "She always this stubborn?" "You have no idea," William said with a grin. "Clara once argued with a horse trader for 4 hours straight until he gave her the price she wanted. That mare was worth twice what he was asking, and he knew it," Clara retorted, but she was fighting a smile. Thomas stood, signaling the end of the discussion. "It is settled, then. You will stay in the guest room upstairs once you are strong enough to manage the stairs. For now, the study will do. Clara, your mother will need help preparing supper for this growing household." As her father and brothers filed out, Clara lingered, gathering the medical supplies scattered on the side table. She could feel Jack watching her. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You saved my life. Your whole family has shown me more kindness than I had any right to expect." Clara paused, meeting his gaze. "My father is right. You were trying to do the right thing. That matters." "Does it?" There was a bleakness in his expression that made her heart ache. "Seems like trying to do right nearly got me killed. Might still get me killed and might take your family with me." "We can handle ourselves," Clara assured him. "This is Wyoming territory in 1878, Mr. Thornton. Trouble is nothing new to us. We have faced down cattle thieves, dealt with harsh winters, survived a prairie fire that nearly took the whole ranch. A few crooked cowboys do not scare us." For the first time, Jack truly smiled, and it transformed his entire face, softening the hard edges and bringing warmth to his eyes. "I believe you could face down just about anything, Clara Whitmore." She felt heat rise to her cheeks and turned away quickly, busying herself with folding bandages. "Get some rest. You need to regain your strength." Over the following days, Clara found herself spending more and more time in the study with Jack. At first, she told herself it was simply to monitor his recovery, to change his bandages and make sure infection did not set in. But as he grew stronger, able to sit up and eventually stand with assistance, she had to admit the truth to herself. She enjoyed his company. Jack was intelligent and well-spoken, surprising for a ranch hand. He told her he had grown up in Texas, the son of a schoolteacher mother and a rancher father who had died when Jack was 16. He had worked various jobs across the West, never staying in one place too long, always searching for something he could not quite name. "What are you looking for?" Clara asked him one afternoon as they sat in the study. She by the window with her mending and he propped up on the couch with a book from her father's shelf. Jack was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he said, "A place to belong, I suppose. Somewhere that feels like home. I have not had that since my mother died 5 years ago." "I am sorry," Clara said softly. "That must be very lonely." "It is," he admitted, meeting her eyes. "But these past few days here with your family, it is the first time in a long while I have felt something close to what I have been missing." The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with something Clara did not quite have words for. She was saved from having to respond by Sarah bursting into the room, her blonde curls bouncing. "Clara, Mama needs you in the kitchen. We are making preserves, and she says you are the only one who can get the sugar measurements right." Sarah's bright blue eyes darted to Jack with undisguised curiosity. "How are you feeling, Mr. Thornton?" "Better every day, thanks to your family," Jack replied with the easy charm that made Sarah giggle. As Clara followed her sister from the room, she glanced back to find Jack watching her, an expression on his face she could not quite read. In the kitchen, her mother was indeed making preserves, but she was also clearly making conversation. "You have been spending a great deal of time with our patient," Catherine observed, stirring a large pot of strawberries on the stove. "Someone needs to monitor his recovery," Clara said defensively. "Hum." Catherine's tone was knowing. "He is a good-looking young man, I will give you that. And he seems decent enough. But Clara, we do not really know him. He could be gone the moment he is well enough to ride." "I am aware of that, Mama." Clara began measuring sugar with more force than necessary. "I am not a child. I know the difference between taking care of someone who is injured and thinking there is anything more to it." Even as she said the words, Clara knew they were not entirely true. There was something about Jack Thornton that had gotten under her skin, some combination of his strength and vulnerability, his intelligence and dry humor. The way he looked at her sometimes made her feel like she was the only person in the room, maybe the only person in the world. But her mother was right to be cautious. Jack would heal and then he would leave, and she would be foolish to let herself care too much, except it was already too late for that. By the end of the second week, Jack was strong enough to move to the guest room upstairs, though the climb left him winded and pale. Clara helped him settle in, fluffing the pillows and making sure he had water and books within reach. "You do not have to fuss over me," Jack said, but there was warmth in his voice. "I am not going to break." "You are still recovering from a gunshot wound," Clara reminded him. "Do not push yourself too hard." Jack caught her hand as she reached past him to adjust the curtains, his fingers warm and strong around hers. "Clara, I need to say something." Her heart was suddenly pounding. "What is it?" "I have been thinking about what I will do when I am fully healed. I need to finish what I started with Coltrane. I owe it to Mr. Mackenzie and to the other hands who have been working honestly while Coltrane steals from under their noses." Clara felt her chest tighten. "You want to go back there? Jack, they tried to kill you once. What makes you think they would not try again?" "I will be smarter this time. I will go straight to Mr. Mackenzie in Denver, tell him everything. With his backing, we can deal with Coltrane properly through the law." Jack's grip on her hand tightened. "But I need you to understand something. If I do not do this, if I just run away and leave Coltrane to keep stealing and hurting people, I will not be able to live with myself. Can you understand that?" Clara wanted to argue, to tell him it was not his responsibility, that he had already nearly died once, and that should be enough. But looking into his gray eyes, seeing the determination and integrity there, she knew she could not ask him to be less than who he was. "I understand," she said quietly. "I do not like it, but I understand." Jack pulled her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles, the gesture so unexpected and intimate that Clara felt her breath catch. "Thank you," he murmured, "for everything, for saving my life, for not judging me, for understanding." Clara knew she should pull her hand away, should put some distance between them. Instead, she found herself sitting on the edge of the bed, her hand still clasped in his. "When will you go?" she asked, though the words felt like swallowing glass. "Not yet. I am not strong enough yet, and I would not leave while there is still a chance Coltrane might track me here and put your family in danger." Jack's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, the touch sending shivers up her arm. "But soon. Another week or two, maybe. 2 weeks." It felt like no time at all and an eternity simultaneously. "Then we had better make sure you are properly healed before you go charging off to Denver," Clara said, trying to keep her tone light. Over the next days, Jack grew stronger. He began taking meals with the family in the dining room, and Thomas put him to work with light chores around the ranch, mending tack and helping James with the ledgers. Jack turned out to have a good head for numbers, and he and James spent long hours going over the ranch's finances, looking for ways to improve efficiency. Clara watched him integrate into her family's daily life with a sense of bittersweet joy. He fit here, she thought. He belonged here with them. With her. But she could see in his eyes that he was still planning to leave, still determined to finish what he had started. It was a Sunday afternoon, with the family scattered on various tasks, when Jack found Clara in the barn. She was brushing down her mare, the rhythmic strokes soothing her tangled thoughts. "Can I talk to you?" Jack asked from the doorway, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the bright sunshine outside. "Of course." Clara set down the brush and gave her mare a final pat. Jack stepped into the barn, closing the distance between them. He had filled out in the weeks since she had found him, his color healthy now, his movements sure and strong. The scar on his temple had faded to a thin, white line, and he moved his shoulder with only occasional stiffness. "I have been doing a lot of thinking," he began, his gray eyes intense. "About my life, about what I want, about the future." Clara's heart was pounding again, but she forced herself to remain still, to listen. "I told you I have been looking for a place to belong," Jack continued. "I have spent 5 years drifting from job to job, place to place, never finding what I was searching for. But these weeks here, with your family, with you, I have realized something." He stepped closer, so close she could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes, could smell the clean scent of soap and leather that clung to him. "I have found it," Jack said softly. "I have found what I have been looking for, Clara. It is you. It has been you since I first opened my eyes and saw you sitting beside me, refusing to let me die." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "Jack, I cannot ask you to give up on seeing justice done. I know how important that is to you. You are not asking. I am choosing." He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle. "I will still go to Denver and talk to Mr. Mackenzie. I will still make sure Coltrane faces justice. But then I am coming back here if you will have me. I am coming back to you." "You do not have to come back just for me," Clara whispered, even as hope bloomed fierce and bright in her chest. "I would not want you to feel obligated." "Obligated?" Jack's laugh was soft and wondering. "Clara, I am falling in love with you. I think I have been since you first ordered me to drink water in that fierce voice you use when you are worried about someone. I am coming back because I cannot imagine my life without you in it." The tears spilled over now, and Clara found herself smiling through them. "I am falling in love with you too, Jack Thornton. I have been trying so hard not to, because I knew you were going to leave, but I could not help it." Jack's smile was brilliant, more open and joyful than she had ever seen him. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, but Clara met him halfway. Their lips touched, gentle at first, then deepening as weeks of unspoken feelings poured into the kiss. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jack rested his forehead against hers. "I promise you, Clara Whitmore, I will come back. And when I do, if you will have me, I would like to court you properly. With your father's permission and everything done right." "I will have you," Clara promised, her hands fisting in his shirt. "Just promise me you will be careful in Denver. Promise me you will come back safe." "I promise," Jack said, sealing the words with another kiss. That evening at dinner, Jack asked to speak with Thomas privately. They disappeared into the study for nearly an hour, and when they emerged, Thomas was smiling, his hand clapping Jack on the shoulder in a gesture of approval. "It seems our patient has become something more than a guest," Thomas announced to the family. "Jack has told me his intentions toward Clara, and I have given him my blessing to court her properly, provided he handles his business in Denver and comes back in one piece." Sarah squealed with delight, jumping up to hug Clara. Catherine smiled knowingly, as if she had seen this coming from the beginning. James and William exchanged glances, then nodded their approval. "Welcome to the family, Thornton," William said. "Or welcome to the chaos, depending on how you look at it." "I am looking forward to the chaos," Jack replied, his eyes finding Clara's across the table and holding. 2 days later, Jack announced he was ready to make the journey to Denver. Thomas offered to go with him, but Jack refused, not wanting to pull the older man away from the ranch during the busy summer season. Instead, James volunteered, and after some discussion, it was agreed that the two men would travel together. The morning of their departure, Clara helped Jack pack his saddlebags, her hands moving automatically while her mind raced with worry. Thomas had given Jack one of their horses, a sturdy gelding named Ranger, and James was already saddling the animals in the barn. "You will write to me when you reach Denver?" Clara asked, folding a clean shirt and tucking it into the bag. "The moment I arrive," Jack promised. He caught her hands, stilling their nervous movements. "Clara, look at me." She raised her eyes to his, seeing the same worry reflected there that she felt. "I am coming back," he said firmly. "Nothing and no one is going to keep me from coming back to you. I have finally found where I belong. I am not giving that up." Clara kissed him then, pouring all her fear and hope and love into it. "You had better come back, Jack Thornton, because I am going to spend every day you are gone missing you." "I will miss you too," he murmured against her lips. "Every moment." They rode out an hour later, Jack and James side by side on the eastward trail. Clara stood watching until they disappeared over the horizon, her hand raised in farewell long after they were out of sight. The days that followed were some of the longest of Clara's life. She threw herself into work, helping her father and William with the cattle, working in the garden with her mother, even taking on Sarah's chores when her sister complained. Anything to keep her mind off the fact that Jack was riding into potential danger. A week after they left, a letter arrived. James had sent it from a way station halfway to Denver, reporting that they were making good time and that Jack was holding up well. Clara read and reread the brief note until she had it memorized, taking comfort in the words even though they told her little. 2 weeks after Jack and James had departed, riders approached the ranch. Clara's heart leaped, hoping against hope it was them returning, but these riders were strangers. 3 men, rough-looking and heavily armed, riding horses that had been pushed hard. Thomas met them at the gate, William at his side with a rifle held loosely in his hands. Clara watched from the porch, her own rifle propped against the railing within easy reach. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Thomas asked, his voice carefully neutral. The lead rider, a man with a scarred face and cold eyes, looked around the ranch with undisguised assessment. "We are looking for a man," Jack Thornton. Heard he might have passed through these parts. Clara's blood ran cold. Coltrane's men. It had to be. Do not know anyone by that name, Thomas said evenly. You might try the town of Silver Creek about 10 miles east. Sheriff there knows most folks who travel through. The scarred man's eyes narrowed. You sure about that? We heard from someone in town that your daughter brought in a wounded man a few weeks back. That would not be Thornton, would it? My daughter found an injured traveler and helped him, Thomas replied, his voice hardening. That is what decent folk do. The man recovered and moved on. Didn't catch his name, and I did not ask. Now, if there is nothing else, I've got work to do. The three men exchanged glances. Clara could see them weighing whether to push the issue, and her hand moved slowly toward her rifle. We will be checking with that sheriff, the scarred man finally said. If we find out you have been lying to us, we will be back. Feel free, Thomas said coldly, but I would advise you not to come onto my property making threats. We do not take kindly to that around here. The men turned their horses and rode off, but Clara could feel the malevolence in their backward glances. As soon as they were out of sight, she hurried down from the porch. You think they believed you? She asked her father. No, Thomas said grimly. But they have got no proof Jack was ever here, and they know better than to start trouble with a man who has got his family armed and ready. Still, we need to get word to James and Jack. William, saddle up. You are riding to Denver. William was already moving. I will leave within the hour. Tell them what happened, Thomas instructed. Tell them those men are looking and they need to be careful. Clara felt sick with worry, but she forced herself to remain calm. Jack had made it out before Coltrane's men came looking. That was something. And with William riding to warn them, they would know to be on their guard. William left that afternoon, pushing his horse hard to cover ground quickly. Clara went back to waiting, each day stretching endlessly before her. It was another week before she got news, and it came not from a letter but from William himself, riding back into the ranch with James and Jack flanking him. Clara was hanging laundry when she heard the horses, and she dropped the sheet she was holding, running toward them without caring how she looked or who saw. Jack dismounted before his horse had fully stopped, catching Clara as she threw herself into his arms. He held her tight, his face buried in her hair, and she felt him shaking, whether from emotion or exhaustion she could not tell. You came back, she whispered against his chest. You came back. I told you I would, Jack said, pulling back to look at her face. Nothing was going to keep me away. Thomas and Catherine came out of the house, and the whole story came out over coffee in the kitchen. Jack and James had reached Denver without incident and met with Mr. Mackenzie, who had been shocked and furious to learn of Coltrane's betrayal. The older man had immediately contacted the authorities, and a marshal had ridden out to the Circle M with Mackenzie to arrest Coltrane and his accomplices. Turns out we were not the only ones Coltrane had crossed, James explained. 2 other ranch hands came forward once they heard he was being arrested, saying he had threatened them to keep quiet about his stealing. The marshal said Coltrane is looking at serious prison time. Justice is served, Jack added. Mackenzie got his property back, and the honest hands kept their jobs. It is over. Except for Coltrane's men coming here looking for you, Clara said, her hand tight on Jack's. That is why we rode back as fast as we could, William put in. Once we heard from the marshal that some of Coltrane's crew had scattered before they could be arrested, we figured they might come looking for revenge. They did come, Thomas confirmed, and related the encounter with the 3 riders. They rode off, but I do not trust that they have given up. Jack's expression darkened. Then I need to go. If they are watching the ranch, waiting for me to show up, I am putting all of you in danger. You are not going anywhere, Clara said fiercely. We already discussed this. We are not afraid of a few cowards who shoot unarmed men and leave them to die." "Your daughter has a point," Thomas said, a slight smile tugging at his mouth. "Though I might have used more diplomatic language. No, Jack, you are staying, but we are going to be smart about it. I am riding into Silver Creek tomorrow to talk to Sheriff Morrison. If Coltrane's men are in the area, he needs to know." "I am coming with you," Jack said immediately. "So am I," Clara added. Thomas looked like he wanted to argue, but Catherine laid a hand on his arm. "Let them, Tom. The three of you together can watch each other's backs. Besides, Jack is going to need to be seen in town if he is planning to make a life here. Can't hide forever." It was settled. The next morning, Clara rode into Silver Creek with her father and Jack, her rifle in its saddle scabbard, and her eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of trouble. The town was small, just a main street with a general store, a saloon, a hotel, and the sheriff's office, but it served the scattered ranches in the area well enough. Sheriff John Morrison was a grizzled man in his 60s who had been keeping the peace in Silver Creek since before Clara was born. He listened to their story with grave attention, his weathered face growing grimmer by the moment. "I remember those three men," he said when they finished. "Came through here asking questions about a wounded man. I told them I had not heard anything about it, which was the truth at the time. They did not seem convinced, but they rode on." "Have you seen them since?" Jack asked. "No, but that does not mean they are not around." Morrison stood and retrieved a stack of wanted posters from his desk, shuffling through them. "Here. This came in on the stage 2 days ago." He handed a poster to Jack, who studied it with a hard expression. Clara leaned over to look and saw a crude drawing of a man with a scarred face above the name Illy Coltrane, wanted for cattle rustling, theft, and attempted murder. "That is the foreman's brother," Jack said. "He was one of the men who shot me. The scar is distinctive enough. Then he is wanted by the law, and if he shows his face around here, I've got grounds to arrest him," Morrison said with satisfaction. "As for the other two with him, if they are riding with Illy, they are probably wanted too. I will send some telegrams, see what I can find out." They left the sheriff's office feeling somewhat reassured, but Clara could not shake the sense that this was not over. Her instincts proved correct 2 days later when Sarah came racing into the house, her face white with fear. "Men coming," she gasped out. "Same ones as before. They are on the North Road." Thomas immediately began shouting orders. Catherine and Sarah were sent to the root cellar with instructions to stay there no matter what they heard. Clara, despite her father's protests, took up her position on the second floor with her rifle. Thomas, William, and Jack positioned themselves strategically around the property. The three riders approached slowly this time, making no pretense of friendliness. Illy Coltrane sat in the center, his scarred face twisted with rage. The men flanking him had their hands on their guns. "We know he is here, Whitmore," Illy called out. "Saw the three of you in town yesterday, so you can stop lying and hand over Thornton, or we can do this the hard way." "The only way this is going to go," Thomas called back from his position behind a water trough, "is with you turning around and riding away. The law knows you are here, Coltrane. Sheriff Morrison has wanted posters with your face on them. You are only making it worse for yourself." Illy's laugh was ugly. "The law is going to have to catch me first, and after I settle my business with Thornton, I will be long gone to Mexico. So send him out, or we start shooting, and your family pays the price." Clara saw Jack start to move from his position in the barn, saw him prepare to sacrifice himself to protect her family, and she made her decision. She aimed carefully, not at Illy but at the ground in front of his horse, and fired. The shot kicked up dirt and spooked all three horses, sending them dancing and bucking. In the chaos that followed, William and Thomas opened fire as well, forcing the men to wheel their horses and retreat out of range. "Next time I will not miss," Clara shouted from her window. "And we have got enough ammunition to keep this up all day. You want to test that?" There was a tense standoff, the three men grouped together out of rifle range, clearly arguing among themselves. Finally, Illy pointed at the ranch, his gesture unmistakably threatening, then turned his horse and rode off, his companions following. But Clara knew it was not over. Men like Illy Coltrane did not give up that easily. Thomas must have known it too, because he sent William racing to town for the sheriff. Morrison arrived 2 hours later with a hastily assembled posse of 6 men, all grim-faced and armed. "They will likely wait until dark," Morrison predicted, studying the surrounding terrain. "Try to come in quiet and catch you off guard. We will be ready for them." The posse spread out around the ranch, taking up positions in the barn, the bunkhouse, and various points around the property. Clara insisted on staying at her window post, despite both her father's and Jack's protests. "I am the best shot in this family after Pa," she said flatly, "and you need every gun you can get. I am staying." Jack looked like he wanted to argue, but instead he just pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I am so sorry," he whispered. "I never wanted to bring this to your door." "I know," Clara said, pulling back to look at him. "But I am not sorry you are here. I am not sorry I found you. Whatever happens tonight, I want you to know that." "I love you," Jack said, the words fierce and desperate. "When this is over, I am going to marry you, Clara Whitmore, if you will have me." "I will have you," she promised. "Now go, before my father comes looking for you and finds us like this." Night fell slowly, the summer sun taking its time sinking below the horizon. Clara maintained her vigil at the window, her rifle loaded and ready, her eyes straining against the growing darkness for any sign of movement. It came just after midnight. A flicker of motion near the tree line, too deliberate to be an animal. Clara fired a warning shot, and suddenly the night exploded with gunfire. The 3 men came charging toward the house on foot, their horses abandoned at a distance. They were met with a wall of bullets from the posse, but they kept coming, desperation or madness driving them forward. One of Illy's companions went down first, clutching his leg and screaming. The other threw down his gun and his hands went up in surrender, but Illy kept coming, his revolver spitting fire as he ran. Clara saw him heading for the barn where Jack was positioned, saw the murderous intent in his face, and she made her second crucial decision of the day. She aimed carefully, accounting for distance and darkness and her own racing heart, and fired. The bullet took Illy in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending him to the ground. He tried to rise, tried to bring his gun up again, but Sheriff Morrison was there, kicking the weapon away and slapping iron cuffs on Illy's wrists. "It is over," Morrison announced loudly. "All 3 of you are under arrest for attempted murder, assault, and various other charges I am going to enjoy listing out." The posse emerged from their positions, and Clara finally allowed herself to lower her rifle, her hands shaking with reaction now that the danger had passed. She heard footsteps pounding up the stairs and turned to find Jack bursting into the room, his eyes wild. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his hands running over her arms, her face checking for injuries. "I am fine," Clara assured him. "Jack, I am fine. It is over." He pulled her against him, and she felt him shaking, all the fear and adrenaline working its way through his system. "When I saw you shoot, when I realized you were drawing fire to protect me, I thought my heart was going to stop." "I was not going to let him hurt you," Clara said simply. "I love you too much for that." Jack kissed her then, hard and desperate and relieved, and Clara kissed him back with everything in her. Below, they could hear the sounds of the posse securing the prisoners. her father thanking the men who had come to help, Catherine and Sarah emerging from the root cellar. But up here in the darkened room, it was just the two of them, holding each other and breathing and alive. "Marry me," Jack said again, more steadily this time. "Not someday, not when the time is right. Soon. As soon as we can arrange it. I almost lost you tonight, and I am not waiting another day longer than I have to." "Yes," Clara said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, Jack Thornton, I will marry you." The wedding took place 3 weeks later in the Silver Creek Church, a small affair with just family and close friends. Clara wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her taller frame, and carried wildflowers that Sarah had spent the morning picking. Jack stood at the altar in a new suit purchased in Cheyenne, his gray eyes never leaving Clara's face as she walked down the aisle on her father's arm. Reverend Patterson, who had baptized Clara as a baby, performed the ceremony with tears in his eyes. When he pronounced them husband and wife, Jack kissed Clara with such tenderness that several of the assembled guests dabbed at their own eyes. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food enough to feed an army. The whole town turned out, it seemed, to celebrate the couple whose dramatic courtship had become the talk of the territory. Sheriff Morrison gave a toast that had everyone laughing, talking about how Clara had saved Jack's life twice over, and how any man smart enough to appreciate that was worth marrying. As the sun set and lanterns were lit around the yard, Jack pulled Clara away from the celebration and into the barn, seeking a moment of quiet in the midst of the chaos. "Happy?" he asked, his arms around her waist as they swayed to the distant music. "Happier than I have ever been," Clara said honestly. "Though I have to admit, when I found you dying on that trail, I never imagined it would lead to this." "I did," Jack said, surprising her. "Maybe not right away, but once I woke up and saw you sitting there, so fierce and determined to keep me alive, I knew you were going to change my life. I just did not know how much." "We changed each other's lives," Clara corrected, reaching up to trace the scar on his temple, the physical reminder of how close she had come to losing him. "You gave me purpose I did not know I was missing. You showed me what it means to fight for what is right, even when it is dangerous. Even when it is hard. And you showed me what home feels like," Jack replied. "You and your whole wonderful, chaotic family. I spent 5 years drifting, Clara, never finding what I was looking for. And then you found me, literally pulled me back from death and gave me a reason to live. Gave me a place to belong." They kissed as the stars came out overhead, the sounds of celebration fading into the background. This, Clara thought, was what she had been waiting for all her life without knowing it. Not just a husband, but a partner. Not just love, but purpose. Thomas had offered them the use of the foreman's cottage on the ranch property, a small but comfortable 2-room house that Jack and William had spent the past weeks fixing up and furnishing. It would be their home until they could afford to build something larger, and Clara loved it immediately for what it represented. Their future, built together. They spent their wedding night in that cottage, and Clara woke the next morning to sunshine streaming through the windows and Jack's arm wrapped around her waist. She turned in his embrace to find him already awake, watching her with such love in his gray eyes that it made her breath catch. "Good morning, Mrs. Thornton," he said, testing out the name. "Good morning, husband," Clara replied, liking the sound of it. "Ready for your first full day as a married man." "Ready for a lifetime of them," Jack corrected, pulling her closer. "Starting right now." The early days of their marriage were blissful, a honeymoon period where everything felt new and exciting. Jack took to ranch work with enthusiasm, proving himself invaluable in managing the cattle and helping Thomas plan for the coming winter. He had a natural way with horses, and soon he was training the young stock and breaking the wild ones that Thomas purchased from dealers passing through. Clara continued her work around the ranch, but now she had Jack by her side, and they turned even the most mundane tasks into opportunities to be together. They would talk for hours while mending fence or checking on cattle, sharing stories from their pasts and dreams for their future. "I want to expand the ranch someday," Jack told her one afternoon as they rested in the shade of a cottonwood tree, their horses grazing nearby. "Your father has built something good here, but there is potential for more. Better breeding stock, maybe some crop farming in the river bottom land." "Pa would like that," Clara said, leaning against his shoulder. "He has been talking about wanting to slow down, maybe let James take on more of the daily operations. If you and James worked together, you could build this place into something really special." "And what do you want?" Jack asked, tilting her face up to look at him. "What are your dreams, Clara?" She was quiet for a moment, considering. "I want a family," she finally said. "Children running around the ranch, growing up with the land the way I did. I want to build something that lasts, something we can pass down to them. I want what my parents have, that partnership and love that has lasted through hard times and good. I want that with you." "Then that is what we will build," Jack promised, sealing it with a kiss. Their first winter as a married couple was harsh, with snow piling up to the windows and temperatures dropping so low that water froze in the pump overnight. But the cottage stayed warm, and Clara discovered that being snowbound with Jack was no hardship at all. They spent long evenings by the fire, reading to each other or playing cards, and the isolation felt less like a trial and more like a gift of time together. It was in the spring, when the snow was finally melting and the first green shoots were appearing on the prairie, that Clara discovered she was pregnant. She told Jack one evening after supper, watching his face transform from confusion to shock to pure joy in the space of a heartbeat. "A baby," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "We are going to have a baby, in the fall, the doctor thinks," Clara confirmed, laughing as Jack swept her up and spun her around, careful despite his excitement. "Jack, put me down before you drop me." He set her down gently, then immediately dropped to his knees, pressing his ear against her still flat stomach. "Hello in there," he said solemnly. "This is your pa. I just want you to know that I am going to love you and protect you and make sure you have the best life possible. And your mother is the most amazing woman in the world, so you are already starting out pretty lucky." Clara felt tears streaming down her face as she ran her fingers through Jack's dark hair. "You are going to be such a good father." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though the summer heat made the final months uncomfortable. Catherine fussed over Clara constantly, and Sarah was already planning to be the favorite aunt. Thomas built a beautiful oak cradle in his workshop, carving running horses into the headboard, and William whittled a collection of small animals for the baby to play with. But it was Jack who was the most attentive, refusing to let Clara do any heavy work and constantly checking to make sure she was comfortable and happy. He read to her every night, his hand resting on her growing belly, and talked to their unborn child about the ranch and the horses and all the things they would do together. "You are going to spoil this baby rotten," Clara teased him one evening as he insisted on propping her feet up with extra pillows. "Absolutely," Jack agreed without shame. "This baby is going to know every single day how much it is loved and wanted. I never want our child to feel alone or unwanted the way I did after my mother died." Clara's heart ached for the lonely teenage boy Jack had been, and she pulled him down beside her on the bed. "Our children will never feel that way," she promised. "They will have two parents who love them, and grandparents and uncles and an aunt. They will have this whole ranch full of people who care about them." Their son was born on a cool October evening in 1879, just over a year after Clara had found Jack on that dusty trail. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Jack, pacing in the kitchen while Catherine and the doctor attended to Clara, thought he might lose his mind with worry. But when he finally heard the baby's cry and Catherine emerged with tears in her eyes and a smile on her face, he knew everything was going to be all right. "You have a son," Catherine told him. "A big, healthy boy, and Clara is fine, just tired. You can go see them now." Jack barely remembered crossing the cottage to the bedroom, but suddenly he was there, kneeling beside the bed where Clara lay exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. "Jack, meet your son," Clara said softly, angling the baby so Jack could see his face. The baby had a shock of dark hair and eyes that were still the unfocused blue of all newborns, but Jack could already see traces of Clara in the shape of his nose and the set of his mouth. He was perfect, absolutely perfect. "Can I hold him?" Jack asked, his voice rough with emotion. Clara carefully transferred the baby to Jack's arms, and Jack stared down at his son with wonder. "Hey there, little one," he whispered. "I am your pa. I have been waiting to meet you." The baby's tiny hand wrapped around Jack's finger, and Jack felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. This was his son, his and Clara's, a new life they had created together, a future they would shape and guide. "What should we name him?" Clara asked, her eyes heavy with exhaustion but filled with love as she watched Jack with their baby. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had never quite settled on one. Now, looking down at his son, Jack knew exactly what felt right. "Thomas," he said, "after your father. Thomas James Thornton, if that is all right with you." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "It is perfect. Pa will be so honored." And Thomas Whitmore was honored, so much so that he could barely speak when Jack and Clara told him the next day. He held his tiny namesake with the gentleness of long practice, having held all his own children, and now this grandchild, and there was wonder in his weathered face. "You have given me a great gift," he told Jack and Clara. "Both of you. This little one is going to be surrounded by love. I can already tell." The months that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and the steep learning curve of new parenthood, but Jack and Clara navigated it together. Jack proved to be a natural father, patient and gentle with the baby, always willing to take the night feedings or walk the floor when Thomas was fussy. "I never knew I could love something this much," he told Clara one night as he rocked their son back to sleep. "Between you and him, my heart is so full sometimes I think it might burst." "I know exactly what you mean," Clara said, watching her two favorite people with contentment. "Sometimes I think about that day I found you on the trail, and I cannot believe how much our lives have changed. If I had ridden a different route, if I had been even an hour earlier or later, we might never have met." "I do not believe that," Jack said firmly. "I think somehow, some way we would have found each other. We were meant to be, Clara, you and me and this little guy. This is the family I was always meant to have." Their son grew quickly, a happy baby with his father's gray eyes and his mother's determined chin. By his first birthday, he was walking and getting into everything, his curiosity about the world around him endless. Jack and Clara watched him explore with patient amusement, intervening only when he got himself into actual danger. 2 years after Thomas was born, Clara discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she knew what to expect, and the pregnancy felt easier despite the challenge of chasing after an active toddler. Jack had taken on even more responsibility at the ranch, working in partnership with James to manage the expanding operation. Thomas Sr. had indeed started to slow down, his arthritic joints making long days in the saddle difficult, and he was content to let the younger generation take the lead. Their second son, William Henry, was born in the spring of 1882, a smaller, quieter baby than his brother had been. Thomas, now nearly 3, was fascinated by the new addition to the family, constantly wanting to help with diaper changes and feedings. "Gentle," Clara would remind him as he patted the baby's head with perhaps more enthusiasm than necessary. "Remember, baby Willie is little." Jack, watching his 2 sons together, felt that same overwhelming love he had experienced when Thomas was born, multiplied now across 2 children. Their family was growing, and with it, his sense of purpose and belonging. Life fell into a comfortable rhythm over the next few years. The ranch prospered under the combined efforts of Jack and James, and they were able to purchase additional land and expand the herd significantly. Thomas Sr. officially retired from active ranch management on his 60th birthday, though he still spent most days pottering around, offering advice and spoiling his grandsons. Clara and Jack's cottage had grown too small for their expanding family, so in 1883 they began construction on a proper house on a beautiful piece of land that Thomas deeded to them as a gift. It was a 2-story structure with a wide porch and large windows that caught the morning light, and Clara designed it with care, thinking about the family they were building and the life they wanted to create. They moved into the new house in the summer of 1884, and that fall, Clara gave birth to their first daughter, Emma Rose. The boys, now 5 and 2, were enchanted by their baby sister, and Jack was utterly smitten. He had thought he could not possibly love another child as much as he loved his sons. But Emma proved him wrong from the moment she wrapped her tiny fingers around his thumb. "You were made to be a father," Clara told him, watching as he walked the floor with Emma, singing her a lullaby his own mother had sung to him long ago. "I was made to be your husband and the father of your children," Jack corrected, leaning down to kiss Clara's forehead. "Everything good in my life comes from you, Clara Thornton. Everything." Over the years, 2 more children joined their family. Another son, named Robert after Jack's father, was born in 1886, and their youngest daughter, Catherine Sarah, arrived in 1888, completing their family of 5 children. The house that had seemed so spacious when they built it now rang with laughter and running feet, with arguments over toys and reading lessons, with the organized chaos that comes with a large, loving family. Jack and Clara often joked that they barely had a moment alone anymore, but they would not have traded it for anything. Jack had become a pillar of the community, respected for his honesty and his skill with horses. He served on the town council and helped establish a school in Silver Creek, so that children no longer had to ride miles to the nearest town for education. Clara taught Sunday school at the church and organized community gatherings, her natural leadership qualities making her someone people turned to in times of trouble. But their favorite times were still the quiet moments, stolen here and there in the midst of their busy lives. Early mornings before the children woke, when they would sit on the porch with coffee and watch the sun rise over the prairie. Late evenings after everyone was in bed, when they would sit by the fire and talk about their day, their dreams, their plans. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1889, Jack surprised Clara with a trip to Cheyenne, arranging for her parents to watch the children for a few days. It was their first time away from the kids since Emma was born, and Clara had to admit it felt strange at first, being just the 2 of them again. They stayed in the finest hotel in Cheyenne, and Jack took her to a restaurant with white tablecloths and music. After dinner, they walked through the town, their hands linked, and Clara found herself thinking about how far they had come from that day on the trail. Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if I had not found you?" she asked Jack as they strolled under the streetlights. "No," Jack said simply, "because that is not what happened. You did find me. You saved my life, and then you gave me a reason to live it. Everything that I am, everything good that I have, started with you pulling me back from death and deciding I was worth saving." "You were always worth saving," Clara said fiercely. "Even before I knew you, even when you were just a stranger dying on the trail, you were worth saving. And now, knowing you the way I do, loving you the way I do, I would do it 1,000 times over." They made love that night with the tenderness of long familiarity and the passion that had never dimmed between them. And afterward, lying in the hotel bed with Clara's head on his chest, Jack said, "Thank you." "For what?" Clara asked, tracing lazy patterns on his skin. "For everything. For finding me, for loving me, for giving me this life, this family, for being my home." Jack's arms tightened around her. "I spent so many years looking for something I could not name, and it turned out what I was looking for was you. It was always you." Clara tilted her head up to kiss him. "And you gave me purpose I did not know I needed. You challenged me, supported me, loved me. You made me a better person, Jack. We made each other better." As the years continued to pass, their children grew and developed their own personalities and dreams. Thomas, the eldest, showed his father's skill with horses and his mother's determination. And by the time he was 16, he was already talking about expanding into horse breeding as a specialized business. William was quieter, more scholarly, with a love of books that led him to talk about going to university in the East. Emma inherited her mother's fierce independence and her father's gray eyes, and she could ride as well as any of her brothers. Robert was the charmer, able to talk his way into or out of almost any situation. And little Katie, the baby, was adored by everyone and knew it. Jack and Clara watched their children grow with pride and occasional bittersweet nostalgia for the days when they were small. But they also looked forward to what was coming, to the adults their children would become, to the grandchildren that would eventually arrive. In 1895, when Thomas was 16 and Katie was 7, Jack and Clara took a ride out to the place where Clara had found him 17 years earlier. They had not visited the spot in years, both of them too busy with the demands of the ranch and raising children, but something made Clara suggest it one afternoon. The trail looked different now, more traveled than it had been back in 1878. But Clara found the cluster of sagebrush easily enough, the spot where she had first seen Jack's crumpled form. They dismounted and stood together, looking at the ground that held such significance for both of them. "This is where it all started," Jack said quietly. "Where you saw the buzzards and decided to investigate instead of riding past." "I could not have ridden past," Clara said. "It is not in my nature to ignore someone in trouble. I know. It is one of the things I love most about you." Jack pulled her close, and they stood there together, remembering. "Sometimes I wonder about the man I would have become if you had not found me. Would I have died there? Or would someone else have come along and saved me, and I would have gone on to live some completely different life?" "We will never know," Clara said practically. "But I am glad for the life we did build. I would not change a single thing about it. Not even the hard times," Jack asked. "The droughts and the cattle dying, the winter Robert had scarlet fever and we thought we might lose him, all the struggles." "Not even those," Clara said firmly. "Because we faced them together and they made us stronger. They taught our children resilience and the value of family. I would not trade any of it." Jack kissed her there, in the place where their story had begun, with the Wyoming wind blowing across the prairie and the sun warm on their faces. "I love you, Clara Thornton. From that first moment I opened my eyes and saw you sitting beside me. I have loved you." and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you," Clara replied. "My cowboy, my husband, my home." They rode back to the ranch hand in hand, the way they had ridden so many times before, partners in every sense of the word. Their children would meet them at the barn, full of stories about their day and demands for attention. And the evening would be the usual controlled chaos of a large family. But for now, it was just the two of them, riding across the land they had built a life on, surrounded by the legacy of love they had created together. Years continued to unfold with the steady rhythm of ranch life and family milestones. Thomas married a young woman from Cheyenne in 1898, a school teacher named Margaret who fit into the family as if she had always been there. The wedding was a grand affair, held on the ranch with half the county in attendance, and Clara cried happy tears as she watched her oldest son pledge his life to the woman he loved. "He looks like you did on our wedding day," Clara whispered to Jack as they watched Thomas and Margaret dance. "Absolutely besotted." "He is lucky," Jack replied, his arm around his wife's waist. "He found his person young the way I did. Not everyone is that fortunate." Thomas and Margaret built a house on the ranch property and began their own family, presenting Jack and Clara with their first grandchild, a boy named Jack Thomas, in 1899. Holding his namesake grandson for the first time, Jack felt the circle of life complete itself in a profound way. He had gone from a lonely drifter dying on a trail to a man surrounded by family, with children and now grandchildren who would carry his legacy forward. William did go east for university, studying agriculture and business, but he came back to Wyoming after graduation, full of new ideas for improving ranch operations. Emma, true to form, announced at 18 that she was going to be a veterinarian, shocking the family but also making them proud with her determination to break barriers in a male-dominated field. Robert proved to have his father's way with horses and began training them professionally, gaining a reputation across the territory for his skill. And Katie, the baby, grew into a beautiful young woman who had inherited both her mother's strength and her father's gentleness. Jack and Clara grew older together, gray creeping into their hair, lines deepening around their eyes and mouths. But they aged the way people who are deeply content with their lives age, with grace and gratitude. They still stole moments alone when they could, still made each other laugh, still reached for each other in the night. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1904, their children threw them a celebration that brought together everyone they had ever known. The ranch was packed with people, from old Sheriff Morrison, now retired but still sharp as ever, to families from across the county who had known Jack and Clara for decades. Speeches were made, toasting the couple who had built such a strong family and contributed so much to their community. Thomas spoke movingly about the example his parents had set, teaching him what true partnership looked like. Emma made everyone laugh with stories of her childhood. Katie sang a song she had written especially for them, but it was Jack's speech that left not a dry eye in the crowd. 25 years ago, he began, his voice still strong despite his 52 years. I was dying on a trail in the middle of nowhere. I had been shot, left for dead, and I had given up hope. But then an angel appeared, a fierce, stubborn, beautiful angel who refused to let me die. He reached for Clara's hand, pulling her to stand beside him. Clara Thornton saved my life that day in more ways than one. She saved me physically, yes, but she also gave me a reason to live. She gave me a home, a family, a purpose. She gave me love I had stopped believing existed. Jack's eyes glistened with emotion as he looked at Clara. These 25 years have been the greatest gift of my life. Through good times and hard times, through raising 5 incredible children, through building a ranch and a legacy, you have been by my side. You have been my partner, my best friend, my great love." He raised his glass. To Clara, the woman who found a half-dead cowboy and decided he was worth saving. I have spent every day since then trying to be worthy of that decision. I love you more today than I did on our wedding day, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. Here is to 25 more years, and to whatever comes after that. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, and Jack kissed Clara while their children and grandchildren and friends celebrated around them. That night, after everyone had gone home and the ranch was quiet, Jack and Clara sat on the porch of their house, watching the stars come out. They had done this countless times over the years, but it never got old, this peaceful moment of connection. "Did you ever imagine," Clara asked, her head resting on Jack's shoulder, "when you were young and drifting from place to place, that your life would turn out like this?" "Never," Jack admitted. "I could not have imagined this much happiness, this much love. I could not have imagined you, Clara. You exceeded every dream I ever had." "I could not have imagined you either," Clara said. "When I rode out that morning, I was just going about my usual routine. I had no idea I was about to meet the man who would change my entire life." "Do you have any regrets?" Jack asked. "Things you wish you had done differently?" Clara was quiet for a long moment, considering. "No," she finally said, "not a single one. Every choice I made led me here, to this life with you and our children and grandchildren. How could I regret any of that?" Jack pulled her closer, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, feeling the solid warmth of her body against his. "I used to wonder what I was searching for all those years," he said softly. "I thought maybe it was adventure or fortune or purpose, but it was none of those things. It was this. It was you and a home and a family. It was belonging." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, until Clara said, "Do you remember what you told me the day we found out I was pregnant with Thomas? You said our children would never feel alone or unwanted." "I remember." "You kept that promise," Clara said, her voice thick with emotion. "Every single one of our children knows they are loved. They have grown up secure and confident because of the home we built for them. That is your legacy, Jack, not the ranch or the horses or any material thing. It is the family we created together." Jack felt tears prick his eyes. "It is our legacy, Clara. None of it would have been possible without you. You are the heart of this family, the foundation everything else is built on." As the years rolled forward, more grandchildren arrived, filling the ranch with new generations of laughter and energy. Jack and Clara stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch, leaving that to Thomas and William, and they enjoyed the freedom that came with age and accomplishment. They traveled some, visiting Emma in Denver, where she had established her veterinary practice, and seeing Robert compete in horse training competitions across the West. They watched Katie get married in a beautiful ceremony in 1910, and they spoiled their growing collection of grandchildren outrageously. But they always came back to the ranch, to the home they had built together, to the land that held so many memories. In 1914, on a warm summer evening, Jack and Clara sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. Jack was 71 now, his dark hair completely silver, his body showing the effects of a lifetime of hard work. Clara was 66, her own hair more white than brown, but her eyes were still bright and sharp. "You know what today is?" Jack asked, reaching for Clara's hand. "Thursday," Clara guessed with a smile. "It is exactly 36 years since the day you found me on that trail," Jack said. "I have been keeping count." 36 years, Clara repeated wonderingly. "It feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once." "I have been thinking," Jack said slowly, "about what I want to say to you, in case I do not get the chance later." Jack Thornton, do not talk like that, Clara scolded, but her grip on his hand tightened. Listen, Jack said gently. We are not young anymore, Clara, and while I plan to stick around for a good while yet, I need you to know some things. I need you to hear them while I can still say them. Clara nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Jack said, his voice steady and sure. Every good moment of my life, every accomplishment, every joy, it all traces back to you. You saved my life, and then you gave me a life worth living. You gave me love and children and purpose. You gave me a home. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it. If I died tomorrow, I would die a happy man, Clara, because I have lived a life full of love. I have been married to my best friend for 36 years. I have watched my children grow into good, strong people. I have held my grandchildren and seen the legacy we are leaving. That is more than most men get, and it is all because of you. Tears were streaming down Clara's face now. You gave me just as much, she said. You challenged me to be better, to be braver. You supported my dreams and raised our children with such love and patience. You made me laugh every single day. You are my heart, Jack Thornton. You always have been. They sat together as the sun set, their hands intertwined, their hearts united as they had been since that day 36 years ago when Clara had refused to let a dying cowboy slip away. Jack lived for 8 more years, making it to 79, and in all that time, his love for Clara never wavered. He was blessed to see several great-grandchildren born, to celebrate his 50th wedding anniversary, to watch his legacy grow and flourish. When he finally passed in 1922, it was peacefully in his sleep, with Clara beside him as she had been for half a century. He had lived a long, full, happy life, surrounded by love until the very end. Clara mourned him deeply, as did their children and grandchildren, and the entire community that had known and respected Jack Thornton. But even in her grief, Clara found comfort in the life they had built together, in the family that carried on their legacy of love. She lived for another 12 years, to the remarkable age of 88, and in all that time, she never stopped talking about Jack. She told her grandchildren and great-grandchildren stories about the cowboy she had found half dead on the trail, about how he had healed and how they had fallen in love. She talked about the life they had built together, the challenges they had faced, the joys they had shared. And when Clara finally passed in 1934, surrounded by 3 generations of descendants, her last words were, "I am coming, Jack. Wait for me." The ranch continued on, passed down through the generations, each one adding their own chapter to the story. But at the heart of it all, remembered in family stories and treasured photographs, were Jack and Clara Thornton, the cowboy and the woman who had saved him, whose love had built a dynasty that would endure for generations to come. Their story became legend in the family, told and retold around dinner tables and campfires. The great-great-grandchildren who never met them still knew their names, still knew the story of how Clara had found Jack dying on a trail, and how he had been so grateful, so transformed by her love, that he had spent the rest of his life showing her what she meant to him. The message that echoed through the generations was simple but profound. Love has the power to heal. Love has the power to transform. And when you find the person who sees you, truly sees you, and chooses to love you anyway, you hold on to them with everything you have. Jack and Clara had found each other against impossible odds. A dying man and a determined woman brought together by chance and held together by choice. They had built a life that mattered, a legacy that endured, a love that transcended even death. And in the end, that was everything.